Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Today on the podcast, we're going to start a little differently. Comment on 1970s running. There are many iconic photographs of marathons. A lot of them are at the finish line. Sometimes it's when runners struggled and had to drop out of the race. There is one iconic photo from the 70s running where no one's moving at all, and it's a picture of the starting line. The famous picture, the six who sat at the New York Marathon 1972. Today on the podcast, we have someone sitting in the second row who happened to be there. So we're going to talk about the state of running, what happened that fateful day that women made a protest against the AAU in 1972, and about her amazing life since then and before. Today, welcome on the podcast, Jaqueline Seltzer. Hi, Jackie.
Hey, good morning. Good day.
Jackie, the screen will say Robert Bell, but we're going to talk about what happened on that day in 1972 with the six who sat photo.
I was dating Lynn Seltzer at the time. He was a track runner. I was very new to the sport. I watched it occasionally and I didn't know anything about running. We decided to go to Central Park just to watch the New York City Marathon. It was a happening and it was considered a date. I was willing to go along. I fell in love with him, so I was willing to go to Central Park that morning. They started the race for women 10 minutes before the men. That was because women were too fragile to compete with men or needed the head start. It wasn't anything like today when the elite women do get a head start. This was in sympathy of women who were not capable of competing with men on an equal level. So,
let's just say this was at a stage when there seemed to be a concession to allow women to even enter the race. And it was not many years after the first time that women were allowed to enter. What did you know about the state of running or the coming protest when you walked up? You went to the starting line that day to watch the beginning of the race?
That's correct. I was still in college at the time, very accustomed to protests. The Vietnam War was going on. There were other struggles. So the university system had their own protests. I was embedded in the world of protests as a college senior at the time. So protest was something if women wanted to have equal rights. And at that time, the equal pay movement, equal rights, equal work recognition, recognizing that women needed to be more on the same plateau as men. I was ready to sit down. I knew I wasn't going to be in the race as a participant. But
let's walk through what happened. You get up in the morning, you're going to go to the race, and just without the idea of protesting, did you know there was a protest? What happened when you walked up and you decided to sit down? Let's just walk through what happened in the moment and telling it what happened.
Okay. So I'm standing there, they're ready to start. I was with my husband. We were talking, saying, okay, what's delaying the start? What's happening? What's happening? That's when I learned, okay, women are not being given the same treatment as men. So my husband said, go sit down. And I knew I wasn't part of that running community, but to show my support, I sat down and purposely went into the second row, not to align myself with the real participants, the real heroines or heroes that day.
You walk up to the starting line. There's approximately 270 men in the race at this point. It's still a small race compared to today. You walked up and what'd you say? I want to join in. I'm going to sit down. How was the reception? Did they make room for you? I want to know what happened in the moment.
Okay, I just sat down. It seemed to be just a regular situation where you sat down and you wanted to show your support. I don't know who was right next to me. I just sat down because I was encouraged to sit down. I felt the need that if women are not being given the same recognition as men, I should sit down. And looking at the picture later, I see that the men were all standing up behind us. So that's something I reflected on later. But just knowing that there were men supporting us, saying, okay, you have the right to demand what you think is right.
Do you remember any conversations? The men say anything? The women say anything? Did you know anybody? Did you chat with anybody? What happened? What happened during that 10 minutes?
It was just silence. We just sat down in silence. And then the race began officially for men. And that's when I hadn't even dabbled in jogging or running.
But
Uh,
you're with your boyfriend and you notice that there's something going on. And he explained to you that women are protesting
right.
and he says, go sit with them. And you're like, this is my thing. So as you go to sit with them, then in silence, like 10 minutes later, you got to get out of the way before we talk about the purpose and the time and why it all happened. I just say, what happened?
So the 10 minutes was up. The race officially began for all. And I don't know whether it's my idea or my husband's idea that I run just a little bit. So the first loop of the course that day was the transverse loop, the loop that starts at Tavern on the Green, goes to Central Park South up to the 72nd Street transverse. And then the rest of the course was the 6 mile loops. I was in that 2 mile loop. I was running along with someone. He was encouraging me. I don't know if he knew it was the first time I ever set foot as jogger or participant, but he was encouraging me all the way. And after that 2 mile loop, I dropped out. My husband, who had been used to running cross country meets and longer distances than the sprints, did a 6 mile loop with the leaders.
Okay, technically, you bandited the race. You ran the race without a number, no entry. But your husband, was he just an
Just
impromptu jumped
a,
in too?
a bandit as well.
Yeah, great. Before we talk about your personal history and your origin story, were you aware of Title IX that had happened and if it was going to affect universities about that time?
No, I probably learned about it later on that semester. Maybe there was some buzz about that. Going to the city university, we didn't have the same dynamic in sports as some of the private colleges or even the state universities. There were sports teams, but it was something that your city university was like a stepchild type higher education.
I would like to talk a little bit about your origin and growing up then, how you became to this identity of a protester. What kind of upbringing you had and how that led to identity in university.
I was born in Levittown, Long Island. My parents were attenders at Quaker Meeting, Religious Society of Friends. Their DNA was to be liberal, to be tolerant, to be courteous to all, respectful for all, to align themselves with what we would call liberal causes at the time, a civil rights movement. Even when I was a young child, I remember my mother telling me that victims from Hiroshima had come to Long Island and could our family possibly host one of them. We didn't have the financial means or the room to house someone, but that was something that I was learning very young in life.
What was it like living in Levittown? This is an interesting town for people
Y-
that haven't been there.
Yes, and of course, I have hindsight now on how Levitt developed the community. You're supposed to be white, middle class, technically Protestant, very narrow minded, but I didn't realize that growing up. I lived in one of the smaller homes in Levittown. We were probably economically on the lower end of the financial spectrum. It was just suburban community. We had to take a car to the store. I walked once in a while to the Village Green. Billy Joel talks about the Village Green. I grew up in Levittown and a little bit earlier than he did, but we would go to the Village Green to go grocery shopping. When I was entering fourth grade, that's when my culture changed, my personal culture. We moved from Levittown, Long Island to Brooklyn, right across from Pratt Institute, a very cosmopolitan area. We lived near the Myrtle Avenue L. The Myrtle Avenue L was still standing there. It was the first time I was in a classroom with minorities, with people of Latino heritage, with people of African American heritage. So my world really expanded at that time. Of course, my parents were strongly for Kennedy. There was a Kennedy-Nixon race, which was on everyone's mind when I started school that year. And we moved into Brooklyn Willoughby Walk in August 1960.
What were your academic interests? And you mentioned that you came from the lower end economics. What was the vision for you to go to university, and how did you make that transition?
I knew that I was going to go to college. My parents were both college educated. My mother went to Hunter College in the 1930s. My father went to University of Pennsylvania. My sister was the smart one in the family, the one who excelled academically. I didn't quite have that capability, and my mother coached me in that. Actually, when I was a young child, when I was 9 or 10 years old, my mother was pursuing a master's degree at Columbia after teaching adjunct at New York City's community college. She taught a variety of courses, English composition, psychology, and sociology. She wound up teaching at Pratt Institute right across from our buildings in Brooklyn. So going to university was something, it was a given.
Do you remember the first protest type activities you got involved in then?
Probably the Vietnam War in the 1960s. In high school, there weren't too many opportunities to protest like that. I entered Lehman College in January 19, Kent State happened. And at the same time that protests were nationwide, there was a move for City University to start charging tuition. And that was going to create financial hardship for thousands of students. So at the same time that there were protests against what happened at Kent State, and the reason why Kent State was protesting, we had the protest against tuition charges.
All right, let's move back to sports. 1972, you ran your first marathon. You did not finish. You dropped out after 2 miles. What were you aware of as the sport of running, apart from New York Marathon being an event? You would later go on to do dozens of marathons. How did you become interested and participating in running through that next decade then?
I saw how fit athletes in all sports were by watching the 1972 Olympics. My husband went to Oberlin College. We drove out from New York City to Oberlin. We stayed with one of his former teammates. And that's when all of us were glued to the TV watching the 1972 Munich Games. So I had an interest in sports, but at the same time, hey, here I am. I'm 20 years old and I have been in activities, but whenever they chose teams, I like to make the statement, I wasn't last to be picked. I was never to be picked. So that's the way I describe myself prior to my 20s. I would just, oh, okay, why don't you just sit on the sideline? Oh, why don't you watch our bags? Oh, I didn't help us with our shoes, whatever it was. I was the one who was going to be the bench warmer. I knew that I had limited capabilities. My parents never really got involved in sports. I knew when I was growing up is that my father was hospitalized with polio at the time I was born in 1951. So I knew that we didn't have the physical fitness modality in our family culture. My mother never really participated in sports. She had an accident when she was a young child, but she said that she struggled with that type of lack of physical fitness as a young child. Plus, she lost hearing in one of her ears. I just knew that physical was not for me. I was always going to be the one on the sideline.
I want to then talk about what was going on with you as that changed, as you started running, and how did you learn to run? What was the state of the world of running that you discovered when you started?
So I did a lot of watching. I did a lot of spectating. My husband entered races here and there. His specific event was the 880 yards. Now it's the 800 meters. He was more of a sprinter, but he entered a few races and watched a few races. So I was eating. I was very consumed about my body. I wanted to have the body of these Broadway stars and dancers. Why can't I? Why do I put on weight just by looking at a bagel? So there was this one day in 1979 when I ate too much. I ate a whole loaf cake. And I thought, okay, just one more slice, one more slice. And I said, you know what? This has to stop. I went out and ran. And where I live now, where I've lived in 1979, there's an area that is a development of buildings that's 3/4 of a mile around. It's called Peter Cooper Village. I went out and I ran 4 times around Peter Cooper. My legs were wobbly. That feeling when you first started to run, where your legs are shaking, that's the feeling I felt. I said, okay, I'm going to keep this up. I'm going to keep this up. And I did day after day. And I was always, again, the slow one. My husband would go out and run and meet up with someone and say, hey, let's run, let's talk, let's run. And I would be the one in the back. I would be the straggler. Even when we went to Club Med a few times, there would be little running groups meeting in the mornings. Okay, I'm the one in the back. That's okay. You can pick me up.
Let me frame this and say it wouldn't be long before you would enter a marathon from wobbling around, wobbly legs to
Those
make
wobbly
3 miles.
knees.
How was the process of you saying, hey, I'm going to run 26 miles? And why did you have that goal? Why did you want to run a marathon?
Marathon was the big buzzword then. This is 1979. My very first race was a Bloomingdale Perrier in New York City. That was a 10-kilometer race, and I did it. I was probably among the last 25 to finish. They may have had 300 runners at the time. Meanwhile, I can brag about my husband because I feel like I can. He was in the race. He was so proud when he finished. Hey, I finished with Nina Tuesday. I didn't really meet her, but he was so happy. I kept up with the first woman. I kept up with the first woman. And he broke 40 minutes. It was a thrill. And he was thrilled. So we started going to these New York Roadrunner Club races. At that time, New York Roadrunners was based in the Y, right off of Central Park, where they had the ceremony at the 1972 marathon with one trophy or something. And we started going to races. I guess that's when it was a marathon mystique. Everyone was talking about, oh, I did this marathon, I'm going to do the New York City Marathon. We actually went to the award ceremony at races, and they would talk about the marathon, the entry process. You would have to bring in a self-addressed stamped envelope to the general post office and wait for the application to come in. It was talking about these memories is epic. It's really bringing a big smile to my face.
Yeah,
So,
let
yeah.
me ask you what that experience was in those early races. As you weren't going alone, you weren't expecting to perform at a high level. What was the percentage, for example, of women in the races? And Were you concerned about running shoes? How did you develop your training preparation for that first marathon? All of that stuff.
The running shoes, I guess we got from Super Runner, Gary Murphy's store. That was right near Central Park. Everyone went to Super Runner. We didn't go to Paragon Sports. We didn't get the shoes to match our outfits. That's the one thing they said, that there was this myth that runners would go in and say, yeah, I'm wearing blue shorts that day. Let me get a blue pair of sneakers. No, like you would go to an expert such as Gary Murphy's staff at Super Runner, and they would ask you, what type of foot do you have? And that's when I started to see well-known podiatrist in the field who was at the finish line for the New York City marathons. Murray Weisenfeld, I know if you know the name. He wrote the Runner's Repair Manual. He's a well-known expert on the New York City running community. So I was seeing Murray Weisenfeld, so he gave me some guidance. I have a high arch, so I knew the type of foot type I had and find that I had to be fitted for a shoe. I couldn't just say I'm wearing a beige top that day. You had to get expert advice on the type of foot you have, whether you have a wide foot, a narrow foot, a high arch. Yeah. So that was the expert advice I got on shoes. In terms of training, my husband was part of a running club. I was a little tag along. So in terms of my training, I may have done 1 or 2 18-mile runs. I didn't take the training as seriously as I did in later years.
Right. What do you remember about your first marathon? About how many people were there? When you started, were they handing out any kind of prizes, medals? Was there water stops? How did you survive your first 26-mile run?
There were water stops. I took up running on a semi-regular basis starting in 1979. My very first marathon was May 1981, the Long Island Marathon. One of the people I knew that my husband's club was Warren Street Social Athletic Club. Paul Fetcher won that marathon. I think he won the inaugural one when it's called the Earth Day Marathon. So those are the type of people I was getting advice from. I wasn't really considered their peers, but those are the type of people we were going to parties with and stuff like that. A Long Island Marathon started 8 o'clock in the morning. And again, I wasn't sure about the type of training, the type of preparation I had. I really wasn't too well versed in it, although I did read the Runner magazine regularly. I start on the race, I start talking, oh, this is fun, this is fun, this is fun. And what I do remember, I can't speak to the number of women versus men, though I would guess it was probably 33% women. I remember seeing Kate Knight and Ralph Perry. They're known for their triathlons. I knew them from Central Park and all that. I remember seeing them along the way. I say, hey, this is fun. This is fun. We did our first 10K. Hey, I can last another 20 miles. Not. But, we get to the halfway point, which at that point was Jones Beach. Then we do the turnaround and we're on the East Meadow Parkway. No shade. And of course, I was the frugal one. I got the cheapest sunscreen possible. It did not work. It was this orange look. I got sunburn. So here it was, a sunburned mess. And I know that I stopped to walk along the way. I didn't want to. People did not take walk breaks then. That was not, what real runners did. I wanted to break 4 hours, not, I think I did something like 4:21. Okay. I was proud of that. Afterwards, we went to Paul Fetcher's house for some sort of party or whatever it was, and just to watch TV or something. But we went to Paul Fetcher's house, and I was a little bit disappointed, but I knew, okay, my first feeling when I finished, I said, why the heck do people do this? I've never joined this again. Never. You wouldn't tell me. The wild horses couldn't, but anyway, okay, I think maybe a week later, I put my thinking cap back on. I said, gee, New York City Marathon is coming up. The Long Island Marathon was in May. New York City Marathon was in October at that time. I said, yeah, I'll give it another try. I'll see if I can do it. So I did my training. Again, it was by myself because I was the slow one. People on Warren Street, women on Warren Street in those days were breaking 3 hours easily. I was just a little along, I would call myself. Okay, I did training by myself in the morning. I remember running around City Hall Park in Manhattan by myself and just doing these runs by myself. And that's the way I put in the miles. So when New York City Marathon came, I remember I was interviewed a few weeks before Bill Noel. He's known for force measurement. Bill Noel is a name back to the 70s. He called me one day, wanted me to do something for him to help him out. And he said, "What's your goal for the marathon this year?" And I said, "Well, I just want to do 3:59." So I think I did somewhere in the 3:50s.
Let's talk about what else was going on in the world and your life then a decade after your sit down at the start. The America had boycotted the 1980 Olympics. You probably watched the 76 games, and then America was involved in the boycott of the Olympic Games. And you have moved on in your life. So let's talk about that. What else was going on in your life and your career? But
1981, I was with a textbook publisher, and I think I was a sales coordinator or an executive assistant. I did get a promotion where I had a staff. My life at that time, 1980, reflecting on the boycott, was more involved with politics. I was on the executive committee of a political club, liberal political club in the area, going back to my parents' activist activities. So the 1980 Olympics, I remember talking to Elizabeth Holtzman, senator. I just said, "I agree with you on so many things, but I don't agree with you boycotting the Olympics." There was in the local assemblyman, Tony Olivieri, who was opposed to the boycott. I just remember that was on my mind, but it was more from the political stance of the boycott. I remember watching the 1980 Olympic trials. To be honest, I don't remember too much of being involved in the sport at that time, more than being involved in politics. And so my life merged and I became a serious runner. I had to put politics on the back burner and concentrate on my running. 1981 is putting in the miles. 1984, I remember that's a spectacular year to reflect on.
let's talk about that. That was, of course, the first women's marathon at the Olympics. Let's talk about how running then integrated into your professional life over the years and how you changed professions and how you involved running and how much of it was of your life. How by then in the early 80s, you viewed yourself as a runner. I am a runner as an identity, right?
At that point, I wasn't an award winner, but I was a middle of the pack runner. And that was fine with me. Going from never to be picked to middle of the pack. Hey, I'm wearing a size 4 dress now. I'm not wearing the size 10 I was wearing when I got married. I was very pleased with my progress. 1984, okay, I had a young child at the time. He was born 1983. So I was running in local races. I didn't do the marathon 1983 because I had the baby September 27th. But I did 1981 New York City, 1982 New York City, and then 1984. And so I continued with marathons, but still middle of the pack type capabilities. I can say something interesting about my son being born because one of the friendships we developed from running, I was friendly with Eddie Foyle. That name might ring a bell, but he's also a runner. He was a recovered alcoholic and he wrote a running column in the Daily News. And I think it appeared every Friday. It's just a short column. He would give nods to local runners, what they did in this 5 mile, what they did in this qualifier for another race. He got to know all the runners. That was his life. He was a well-known local columnist. When my son was born, he was born at 2:08 in the afternoon. Okay, somehow we got in touch with Eddie And I told her, my son Matthew was born at 2:08 this afternoon. I'm very proud, proud of everything. And so he wrote in his column the next week that my son was born at 2:08. Didn't quite beat the world record for the marathon.
That's
So
great.
to that. That's his column about me. Going on to 1984, I was inspired. Hey, women can run the marathon. And I'd actually met Catherine Switzer and Nina Cusick on a few occasions, being local New Yorkers. I read that if it weren't for women like Nina Cusick and Catherine Switzer and the six who sat, there wouldn't be an Olympic marathon. I remember reading about them going to the RRCA conventions and fighting for the right for women to run more than 1,500 meters in the Olympic Games.
Yeah. Let's just talk quickly about those six who sat. You mentioned Catherine and Nina. Did you connect with the others? Are you in touch with any of them 50 years later?
Really? No. I guess I was still am the background person. I've seen them interviewed. I saw them interviewed in Boston and a few other panels. And I just sit in the background. I may have shown Catherine Switzer the picture. I saw her this year in Boston and I showed her the picture. And I still consider myself, I'm not part of the six who said. I'm not. I didn't do too much for the running women's equality in running. I was just a participant. I was moved by
Yes.
that. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. But what you have done, let's talk broadly and then maybe get into some specifics and details and memories. You've run dozens of marathons over the next several decades, and you went from being in the back of the pack, at least in age group categories. How did your psychology also change? Uh, Competition. Did you become competitive? How was your attitude about your goals in running then over those years?
As I approached my late 30s, I was winning awards here and there. I was in the Mayor Anthony Wayne Marathon that was held in New Jersey. I was shocked that I got an age group award, but I did. I broke 4 hours and I was thrilled, thrilled, thrilled. My marathon times really aren't that spectacular. It was shorter distances. But as I was in my late 30s, I would be very cognizant. I would, after a race, you want to cool off a little bit. Then you want to go to the truck to see the results pages. You want to see those results. What were the results? So who came ahead of me? Who came ahead of me? So that competitive spirit, I think, started in my late 30s. It was like 1980s, late 1980s, my competitive spirit. I can go back a little bit actually. When my son was, I don't think he was yet 1 year old. The first time I was a mother on Mother's Day, there was a local little race in New Jersey. We were staying with my in-laws, go out to this race in New Jersey. I think it was a 5-mile race. The first woman was skinny as a string bean, wearing the racing flats and all that. Here I am, and I think I come in, whatever it was, 5 minutes behind her. I was used to the fact that I wasn't in the same league. Okay, I wasn't in the same league as this 20-something who may have won lots of money and prizes. So I wanted to talk to her. Congratulations on winning. And she didn't even acknowledge me. She was bragging and stuff. Oh, yeah, I was trying to keep up with the mayor. I was trying to keep up with the mayor in 525, whatever it was. And was used to that. Believe me, I was used to that runner's snobbery treatment. That's the way I perceived it. Maybe it is not entirely real. I remember I came in second place. Okay, I came in second place. They made a big deal about giving her an award. Oh, here's first place winner, blah, blah, blah. She gets a tracksuit, she gets this, she gets that. And then for second place, no award. Okay, that's the way it is. But then they said, oh, okay, who's the first mother in the race? And I said,
That's great.
I was over the moon. I remember the color of the apple. It's all coming back. It's a very light shade of burgundy. It would be so like in between salmon color and burgundy. And I treasured that. I don't know what happened to the trophy, but I just said, I'm here. This is 1984, actually, probably a few weeks before the marathon trials.
Before summer,
Yeah.
May.
I felt maybe if I had to point to a race where I had to say I've lied, that was it. I think after
Great.
the race, when they would print out the race results and paint them on the truck.
That's great. Let's talk then a little bit about technology, shoes, the changing of the races, water stops, numbers, electronic timing. You were through all that once you got started in the 80s. How was that changing the size of the pack at the meets and your attitude now? Having experienced the runner snobbery on the receiving end, how did you treat other people?
This day, I treat the back of the pack, the walk runners, the total walkers. I've been in their shoes, so to speak. So I do treat them well. I treat the winners, the elites, local elites. I guess having a Quaker background too, the all inclusive. Everyone has a meaning and, yeah, a purpose, and it has the right to be happy. Has the right to. That's in my DNA. And the other questions, I remember the old-fashioned chips. Sometimes they would fall off the shoe. Carrying it through the finish line didn't really work. Yes, I remember that. And you may know the name David Katz. I think he designed some of the first chips, and it's always hard to put them on. And if you couldn't find the right person to tie that, I guess it's something that's happened. The technology that put the timing chip on the bib is amazing. And at this point, it's a no-brainer. People who are running now, who started running 5 years ago, saying, "What's the problem with timing now?" I think there are races when you were given index cards when you finished. Pink for girls, blue for boys.
That's great. I wanted to ask you about the community. You were running a lot of races. How far afield did you go? There's plenty of races in that greater New York area. Were you seeing a lot of the same people? Were you meeting people? How about people like Fred LeBeau and race directors? How was that community happening in the 80s?
Yeah, Fred LeBeau was like a local hero, local god. I had a few interactions with him. There were times that he saw my son cutting up in New York Roadrunners when they had the staircase at 89th Street, and he didn't like it too much. I actually wound up hanging out at New York Roadrunners. I was friendly with one of the women who married Sue Sweeney later, but I was friendly with Amy. I don't know if those names have ever come up with you. Okay, so I was friendly with Amy, and I remember during Christmas time, I would just sit down. I was sitting at the reception desk, and people would think I was part of the staff. I did connect with Roadrunner staff at the time. I knew them, and we'd go out to lunch together and stuff like that. Running was still a solo activity for me at the time. As far as traveling to races, yeah, I did that. I did want to travel to races. I was on Warren Street, but only, quote, as my husband's tag along. My husband, his role in Warren Street, in hindsight, would be to pace the first women, the fast women. So he would keep up with Kiki Swiger. So he would pace the faster women. I changed clubs. I changed from Warren Street to Mill Roads. And Mill Roads seemed to have the 3:30 marathoners, the 45-minute 10K. That's where I fell in a few years later. I think maybe it was when my son was a baby, 1984. That's when I joined Mill Roads. They had workouts more at my level, more my water 6 zone level. So I gravitated towards the Mill Roads community.
You ran across various distances. What was your highest mileage training? And what about injuries through this? What kind of.
I was putting in maybe 70 or 80 miles a week at that time in the 1980s. It was, and I had little injuries where I go to Dr. Weisenfeld, Murray would say, okay, take off 2 weeks, you'll be better. So I had shin splints. But they're the type of injuries that cleared up in 2 weeks. Those are little blips on the screen compared to the injuries I had later in life. Fast forward to 1994, when I was really competitive in my 40s. I was running along and I didn't really think too much about it. This pain in my knee. This pain in my knee. It turned out to be a bone spur on my knee.
Wow.
I took off 6 weeks from running. It was a miserable 6 weeks, but I took off the 6 weeks and it went away. I wound up having a knee spur removed by an orthopedist in 1999. But somehow the pain subsided for a few more years and I was able to run in my 40s with the knee spur. I've had 5 or 6 knee operations, all elective surgeries. I've had plantar fasciectomies. I've had a ganglion cyst sac removed from my foot. I had PRP for sesamoiditis. So injury seems to follow me. I've had the treatment of prolotherapy for my psoas muscle. So your injury
Ah,
seem to follow me.
yeah. They didn't even know about that muscle when you started running, I think. That's obscure.
Oh yeah, I read through reading The Runner and later on Runner's World and Running Times and maybe a few other magazines. I learned about the body. I had a friend who I wound up running with. We were morning run-ins together. She said, "You don't know about the body." I said, "Yeah, because I've lived with the word condylation would roll off my tongue. People at my job, I'd say, 'Yeah, I'm going for condylation.' They would look over my insurance claims, say, 'What?'"
Let's talk about your career then and your personality. How do you think your personality is integrated with your training? 80 miles a week, that's a lot of time spent out running. At some point, you were running with other people. Your attention to detail, you have a detail attentive profession.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
and your work with runners about helping them find places to stay, how did that all fit together? And how do you think the whole Jacqueline's package all fits together with all that?
Prior to 2016, I started a job with a textbook publisher in 1985. I was conventions manager. The company, Worth Publishers, got acquired by Scientific American, and they got acquired by Macmillan. So I had a 31-year career in the textbook industry as senior conventions manager. I think it fell into my personality to have this attention to details, juggle multiple projects, to help people. They needed a helping hand a lot of times. So that was the right personality and intellectual fit. It also gave me the opportunity to travel. It's one thing. I left one company to move to another, and I said, I want to travel. When I was at the New York company, in 1981 when I ran my first marathon, so pleased with me and all that. There was a time that I said, I'm working on conventions. Why can't I go to one? Why can't I go to one? I'm doing all the paperwork. I'm getting you the badges. I'm getting you the hotels. I'm sending the books in. I'm sending the supplies. It just occurred to me one time when there was a sales meeting, one that I was not invited to. I was invited to a few others, but not that particular one. I said, okay, I'm in Manhattan. In Queens, there's supposed to be a book fair. Can I go to that meeting? My boss of Hendon Ford came back to me a few days later, said, no, you can't go to that meeting. You have to be in the office. The sales meeting is taking place. We're not going to have a staff in the office. You have to sit in the office and be the quiet little secretary. That's the message I got. And so I said, okay, time to send out a resume. So I sent out a resume. I got a job with a textbook publisher, college textbooks, that was convenient for me to travel to. And one thing I had about that job is that I want to travel. And so I had to pay a little bit of my dues first. I think my first trip came about a year later, but I was thrilled. I went to Austin, Texas. That was my first taste of traveling. I got to be in the shoes of the people I was helping out all this other time. I started off with conventions at Globe Books, probably 1981, 1982. I've been helping out all these people. Finally, 1986, I get to travel to Austin, Texas. Then I was able to travel maybe 4 or 5 times a year. That got my blood flowing. And then as time went on, I became more expert in conventions. I got to meet the exhibit directors for the associations I was working with. I got to know a lot of people in the exhibit industry. That's a little niche of publishing that not too many people want to get involved with. They want to become the editor. They want to become the marketing manager. But I've gravitated towards the conventions and exhibit side and meeting side. So I was able to travel towards the end of my career with Macmillan. It was about 12 to 15 times a year.
Back when you were doing it a few times a year, were you able to run while you traveled? Did that schedule live? And did you find other runners?
One of the things that got me hired with Worth Publishers before it became part of the big conglomerate was that I was a runner.
Really?
The company had a few marathoners. I think a 2:45 marathoner and a few other slower ones. They decided before I came to the company, this group of about 3 or 4 men decided, hey, why don't we have a fun run with the American Accounting Association? My boss saw that I'm a runner. She saw that I had the capability of managing exhibits and conventions. He said, okay, Jackie, I want you to work with our fun run at the American Accounting Association. I said, deal.
That's great. Yeah.
So I was the little race director. This race at that time was about 100 runners. Okay, compare it 1985. By that time, races were filling up 2,000 people. I was like, I was thrilled to have the responsibility, but I knew it wasn't the scheme of things that grand. I was put in charge. One of my outside activities was the American Association Fun Run. It had to be held at 6 in the morning because sessions for the AAA started at 8. We had to have the runners to the start, give them refreshments, back to the hotel by 7:30 so they could get ready for those who had 8 o'clock sessions. We would have the awards ceremony at our booth in the exhibit hall. This is where exactly they were given index cards. And we took pictures. One of the big things was we took pictures and had to have them developed at a 1-hour developer class. On a board and have the awards ceremony at our booth. Thinking back, it brought buzz to the booth, it brought buzz to Worth Publishers as we published books in financial accounting and introduction to accounting and all that. So we were able to have our books on display at the same time helping out runners who are hardcore runners. Yeah, they were.
That's great. That's great to have your career and running come together because a whole integrated identity there. Yeah.
Yeah.
More recently, you've worked offering to help individual runners get lodging and in their travels with races.
Yeah, that developed in 2016. The company gave me a very fair severance package. It worked out for the better. I had been going to meetings on meetings. I guess the idea came to me, hey, I can help runners get into the New York City Marathon. Because going back to or even 1990s, I would hear, why are you paying $400 for the double fee in Manhattan for the marathon weekend? I couldn't believe that. I thought that was insane. I looked at the rates that hotels are charging over marathon weekend. I said, this is insane. Why are they profiting off of people who are dedicating their life to fitness? They're struggling to make ends meet. They're raising a family. They have a home. And why should these prices be so outrageous? So that's always in the back of my mind. I had the capability, the hotel connections, to negotiate hotel contracts and charge runners exactly what they're contracting with me. Then someone in the meeting field said to me, he's not getting commission? I said, I knew about commission. So it all evolved. So one of the companies I was friendly with gave me the opportunity to earn commissions. I would set up the contract and he would collect the commission because I don't have the professional designation, IATA number. He would have the IATA number, which enables him to get the commissions. He would take 20% and I get 80%. I said, fine, I'll take that.
And you're helping runners get a better price.
Oh, exactly. I'm not saying you have to stay a minimum of 3 nights. Not saying that you have to pay in advance, not saying that you have to give a down payment or deposit. Having the capability of earning hotel reward points.
Wow. This came up with Nabi Hashishumi, published his interview, and he was talking about that. He had to get up at 3 in the morning, drive from Minneapolis to Duluth because it was a 2-night minimum, $800 a night that weekend because of the
For the
marathon.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing is that having gone through so many injuries, having the capability of canceling a room 10 days in advance without penalty.
Oh,
You never like to say to a hotel, oh, someone in the group might get injured. That is, that is like jinxing it. No, you don't talk about it. The hotels will come to me. I'll get flats in hotels. Why does it cancel the reservation? Why do 5 people cancel the reservation? Family matters. I wouldn't say the guy got injured or has a hip problem or a knee problem or it has
that's
an
great.
no, you don't talk about injuries, but that happens in real life. And for real runners, it's hardcore. I mean, so I have that sympathy. And so I say, I'm not in it for the money. I earned a good income with Macmillan. I'm in a rent stabilized apartment. My son earned a half scholarship to college. His college is paid for. I don't need to have a home in Palm Springs or in Shaker Heights. I don't need that.
Well, that's great what you're doing. Let's finish up with the off-ramping of your career. You were quite competitive and quite successful across several decades. Your last marathon was 2000. What happened to the end of your competitive running it psychologically, your change as we all go through these passages? We can't run as far, as often, as fast. How
Yeah.
did you process all that?
Yeah, it did hit me hard. I was in my 50s. I did have that psoas problem that continued for about 3 years. It was one of these injuries, one of these ailments that only hurt when I breathe. So I was miserable. I I would see runners on the street look the other way. I consider in my life 2003 to 2006 window very dark. I didn't have problem with weight. I just knew that I had more fat than I had. It was when I saw an osteopath who gave me the treatment of prolotherapy that cleared up the psoas calcium buildup. Following that, I was able to get back into racing, not the marathon, not even the half marathon. I had a few other injuries. I had meniscus surgeries 2004, 2005 that didn't prevent me from running shorter distances. So now I'm in my 70s and I am somewhat competitive in my 70s. It's all on the same age group. We can thank Joe Kleinerman for allowing us to have age group awards. I don't know if he did it on a national level, but New York Roadrunners, he saw the need. Why are we just giving out prizes to the first 3 overall, having the fresh out of college athlete win the award and everyone else is chopped liver? So having the age group award capability is a game changer.
Yeah, that's a great point because it's part of the motivation, not just participation medals, but people who do want to compete and celebrate long careers. That's great. I think First Mother is a good award they should have in every race. This is some great insights and fun stories.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, remember, I felt so down when I finished the race. I wanted to congratulate her and she just turned her head and spoke with all the men. Oh, yes, trying to do that. I'm there. I was treated like that. I'm not going to mention names. People on Wall Street treated me like that all the time. So it ain't nothing new. But, at the same time, half an hour later, hey, First Mother, you deserve recognition.
That's great. Yeah, Jacqueline, you're a pleasure to talk to. It's fun. You're just a bright spot to the day. I hope everyone who did that to you, I hope they get to hear this podcast. and wish they were still going at your age. And how far ahead do you look at races and planning things? Are you traveling?
Yes, I'll be traveling to Sydney actually. And this will be part of my business. If Sydney is selected as the seventh world major, I have a few hotels that I'm going to be working for in 2025. Also, 2025, the World Championships in road racing in San Diego. That's going to be for elites and then all comers. So, in terms of my business, I'll be working on that. Whether I'll be able to run in any of those races, time will tell.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. It was great to spend time with you, Jacqueline.
Yeah, it's been a great interview. I'm glad you kept me on your radar.
Let's just mention the person who connected us, Steve Starr. Unpredictable what's going to happen on Steve Starr's Facebook profile, but he's a great person
Oh,
to have that
yeah.
I've met through doing this. And you two are friends.
Yes, we're Facebook friends. We became friends in 2020 when the world shut down and we were just talking to each other on Facebook. A competitive fast runner, Lynn Cook, set up something where real athletes wear masks. There's this kind of this controversy: who wears masks? Are you liberal? You're liberal. You're wearing a mask. So she put up a collage: real athletes wear masks. The collage of about 50 different runners wearing masks. Steve Starr wrote something. I decided to have this collage laminated. I had an 8x10 pictures and 5x7. I said, Steve, would you like these are shorts? So we became friends after that. I have been in local races, and Howard Abrams knows Steve Starr, and Howard Abrams would see me a few times a year and say, "Hey, Steve Starr." I say, "Yeah, we've never met, but yeah, I know Steve." So to bring us back to my recent connection with Steve was that I was in Pinehurst, North Carolina for golfing championships. My grandson at age 9 qualified for this wonderful championship in your world participation in junior age 9. He shot 35 twice. So that qualified him to go to Pinehurst. And that's a huge feather in your cap. I wrote to Steve. I thought Steve lived in North Carolina. He lives in South Carolina. I said, Steve, able to come visit me in Pinehurst? He said, sure, it's a 2-hour drive, no problem. Okay. So we met for lunch just a few weeks ago, and he is just the same in person as on Facebook.
That's great. I haven't met him in person yet, but maybe I'll get lucky too. And I have a friend who lives in Pinehurst, so maybe that's a good rendezvous point for us all.
Linda Carrier?
And then,
Oh, okay. She's going to Sydney. She's been in the 7 continents and a few other races. She wants to do the 50 states. She's working her way through the 50 states.
neat adventure, and it's great to see these great stories and just the little anecdotes that pop up. It's quite an adventure and quite long, interesting career you've had. Good luck with Sydney.
I fly on September 10th, arrive in Sydney September 12th, and then the events for the marathon take place that weekend. And at the same time, I'll be visiting hotels for on
Okay.
2025.
Probably won't publish this till after, and maybe we'll do a quick check-in with you about how that went
Yeah.
and what's the progress with Sydney in the major marathon category and everything else. Talk about that.
Curious about that too, because I know that Cape Town and marathon in China are candidates as well.
For across 5 or so decades, the sport continues to evolve and be interesting.
Oh,
But
it's magnified.
it's just great to meet you, Jackman. You're charming and fun and smiling all the time. It's a bright spot in the day.
Yeah, okay,
Thank-
thanks so much.
All right.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.